Okay, so you want to dive deep into this whole USAID thing?
Yeah.
Buckle up. It's complicated.
It is a fascinating story.
It is.
You know, for decades, USAID played this really crucial role in U.S. foreign policy.
Right.
And most people
Didn't even know it existed.
didn't even know it existed.
Yeah.
It was this kind of quiet giant behind the scenes.
Yeah. Everybody knows that the U.S. sends aid to other countries.
Right.
But USAID was behind so much of it.
Yeah.
So USAID stands for the United States Agency for International Development.
Right.
And it was like the main arm of the U.S. government handling non-military aid that we send overseas.
And their reach was massive.
Huge.
We're talking like over 100 countries.
Wow.
Projects ranging from, fighting diseases like HIV and TB,
Right.
to helping farmers in developing countries, to promoting democracy, to good governance.
And they had these offices, right? Like missions.
Yeah.
Set up in all these different countries,
Yeah.
each managing specific development programs.
Yeah, it was really interesting. It was this mix of USAID's own foreign service officers.
Like specialized diplomats.
Specialized diplomats, exactly.
Right.
And then this whole network of local professionals who really understood the situation on the ground.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so it was kind of like this global team of experts tackling all these really diverse challenges.
So we're talking about a huge operation with a long history.
Absolutely.
Decades, right?
Decades, yeah.
Where did it all begin?
You might be surprised to learn that USAID's roots actually go all the way back to the Cold War.
Oh, wow.
President Kennedy founded it back in 1961 to kind of streamline all the different foreign assistance programs that existed at the time.
So it's like he was trying to present a united front against Soviet influence.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was very much born out of that Cold War strategy.
It's amazing to think that something born out of Cold War strategy ended up having such a huge impact on fighting global poverty and disease.
Yeah.
Like, didn't they play a key role in eradicating smallpox?
They did.
And almost wiping out polio.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And let's not forget PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief.
Oh, right, PEPFAR.
Which USAID was a major player in implementing.
Right.
And that's been instrumental in treating HIV/AIDS worldwide.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how USAID started as a Cold War thing.
Yeah.
But it really evolved to address all these critical global health challenges.
I mean, it continues to evolve.
So beyond these huge initiatives like PEPFAR and smallpox, what else were they doing?
So much of their work was kind of under the radar.
Okay.
Really impactful, but under the radar. Things like supporting sustainable agriculture.
Oh, interesting.
Providing clean water.
Wow.
Even helping communities adapt to climate change.
You
remember that massive drought in East Africa back in 2011?
Yeah, I vaguely remember that.
So USAID was right there on the ground providing emergency relief.
Okay.
And helping communities kind of build resilience in the face of that crisis.
It's interesting because it wasn't just about helping those directly affected either.
Right.
Like the American Farm Bureau Federation has said that USAID's work in reducing hunger and developing these agricultural markets actually opened up new trade opportunities for American farmers.
Absolutely.
So it's like a ripple effect.
Right.
Helping others ultimately helps everybody.
Exactly. Yeah.
But now we got to get to like the heart of the issue here. The dismantling of USAID.
Yes.
This is like a huge turning point.
Absolutely.
It is. And it's
where the story gets really complicated.
Yeah.
And frankly, quite concerning. So the second Trump administration, with its America First philosophy, really decided to essentially dismantle the agency.
I mean, Trump has always been skeptical of foreign aid, hasn't he?
Yes, he's long argued for prioritizing domestic spending.
Right.
But the speed and scope of the changes he's made are unprecedented.
Yeah.
He ordered a near-total freeze on all foreign aid, which caused absolute chaos in the humanitarian sector.
It's like pulling the rug out from under everyone. I was reading about aid workers describing it as an earthquake.
It's a great analogy.
Projects grinding to a halt and people in need wondering where to turn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then enter Elon Musk.
Okay, now this is where it gets even crazier.
You could say that.
Yeah.
So Trump appointed Musk, who is now head of this newly created Department of Government Efficiency, to streamline government spending. And Musk basically said, USA, you're a prime target for cuts, suggesting it should be shut down entirely.
That's a pretty drastic move, especially considering there was already an investigation by USAID's own Inspector General into Musk's Starlink satellite internet company.
Yeah.
Which Seems like a potential conflict of interest.
It definitely raised a lot of eyebrows.
Yeah.
Added another layer of complexity to this already chaotic situation.
Yeah.
It was a mess.
So what happened when the dismantling started?
Well, the consequences were immediate and far-reaching.
Like what?
Reports started surfacing of massive layoffs at USAI.
Like how many people?
Thousands.
Wow.
A lot of them, dedicated their whole careers to this.
Yeah.
And now they're out of a job.
So what, like a tiny percentage of the original workforce is left?
Basically.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
What about the impact on USAID's projects, the people who rely on them?
That's where it gets really concerning. The ripple effects are being felt globally.
Okay.
Like, the impact on global health is especially frightening.
In what way?
Experts are warning that the funding cuts could lead to, diseases like TB and HIV and AIDS making a comeback.
Oh, wow.
Undoing decades of progress.
Right. And it's not just about maintaining the current status quo either.
Right.
We're facing new challenges like antimicrobial resistance,
right.
the threat of pandemics.
Exactly.
And these cuts are happening right in the middle of all of that.
Yeah, it's like this dismantling of USAID could set global health efforts back by years, potentially leading to a devastating loss of life.
I also read a report about over 30 clinical trials being suspended because of the funding freeze.
Yeah. So you've got all these participants just in limbo.
It's a nightmare.
Not to mention, the ethical implications.
Absolutely. Halting medical research so abruptly totally disregards the well-being of the people involved.
Right. They're just kind of forgotten.
Yeah.
And it violates, basic principles of medical ethics. Imagine dedicating years of your life to a clinical trial, hoping for a breakthrough.
Right.
And then suddenly it's just ripped away.
Yeah.
It's awful. And then beyond the human cost, there are also significant economic and political ramifications.
Oh, absolutely.
We talked about the potential impact on American farmers, but it goes way beyond that.
Way beyond that.
So what else?
USAID played a key role in promoting democracy.
Right.
Places like Myanmar.
Okay.
And media freedom.
Okay.
So with those funds frozen, there's a real concern that authoritarian forces could exploit the situation.
So it seems like the decision to dismantle USAID has had a domino effect.
It really had impacting all these different areas. What happens now? Are there any alternatives in place?
That's the big question. There's been some talk of the State Department absorbing some of USAID's functions, but a lot of experts think that's not a viable solution.
Why not?
Well, the State Department is already stretched thin.
Makes sense.
And they just don't have the same expertise or infrastructure to manage these complex development programs.
So like a recipe for disaster, basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I remember reading about how the UK merged their Department for International Development with the Foreign Office a couple of years ago.
Right.
And it faced a ton of criticism.
Yeah.
Like it politicized aid and undermined its effectiveness.
Absolutely. There's a real danger of aid becoming just another tool of foreign policy rather than, a genuine effort to address poverty and improve lives.
Right. Yeah.
Which is, what it should be about.
Yeah, and this brings up a larger question about the future of programs like this. In a world that just seems increasingly skeptical of global cooperation.
It's a worrying trend.
We're seeing this rise in populism and nationalism.
Right.
And those movements, they often just view foreign aid with suspicion.
Yeah, they do. They tend to see it as interference.
Okay.
Or a waste of resources that should be spent at home.
Right.
Take Bolivia in 2013.
Okay.
President Evo Morales, he was a left-wing populist leader.
Okay.
He expelled USAID from the country.
Wow, really?
Accused them of undermining his government.
What were his reasons for doing that?
Well, he argued that USAID was promoting U.S. interests rather than the interests of the Bolivian people.
Okay.
He claimed they were supporting opposition groups and meddling in areas he considered sensitive, like coca production.
So these populist nationalist movements often see foreign aid through a very different lens.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it really highlights the growing challenge for these traditional aid agencies.
Like USAID.
Yeah, like USAID. They're operating in this increasingly complex geopolitical landscape where their role is being questioned.
Right, yeah.
It's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, it does feel like things are changing. And not just with USAID, but all these traditional institutions and approaches.
Yeah, across the board, I think there's this real questioning happening.
It's a time of transition for sure.
It is.
And this trend of declining democracy that you mentioned earlier, that's a big piece of this puzzle.
It is.
Yeah.
The decline of democracy over the past 2 decades has created a much more volatile and unpredictable global landscape.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is where the conversation gets really interesting and potentially controversial.
Okay, well, let's tread carefully here.
Yeah.
You mentioned this idea of leftist idealism being linked to the decline of democracy, and that's a pretty loaded statement.
It is, and it's important to approach this with nuance.
Yeah.
The argument, which you often hear from more conservative voices, is that progressive policies championed by leftist governance are somehow eroding democratic values and institutions.
I can see how that argument might gain traction, especially when you think about USAID being dismantled.
Yeah.
It kind of feeds into this narrative of government overreach and ineffectiveness.
Exactly, but it's important to remember that this is a complex issue with, deep historical roots and a multitude of contributing factors. It's too simplistic to just pin the blame on any one ideology.
Yeah, it's not about taking sides or, endorsing any particular political perspective. It's about understanding the complexities and having thoughtful, informed discussions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think this is where you, the listener, come in. We've given you a lot to process. The history of USAID, the reasons for its dismantling, the potential consequences, the search for alternatives, and even the broader political trends that are shaping the future of international aid.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is.
For sure.
But this deep dive is just the starting point. It's up to you to take this information and continue exploring these issues, asking questions, and engaging in these really critical conversations.
Because ultimately, the future of global development isn't just about governments and institutions. It's about people making choices, raising their voices, and demanding a more just and equitable world.
Exactly.
Right.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question.
Okay.
With USAID's fate hanging in the balance, will other nations or organizations step up to fill the void? Or are we heading towards a decline in global development efforts?
And what does the dismantling of USAID signal about the future of U.S. foreign policy?
Yeah.
What about its role on the world stage? What are the implications for global security and stability if the U.S. just retreats from its role as a leader in international development?
These are big questions, and there are no easy answers. But by asking the right questions, staying curious, and engaging in these crucial conversations, I think we can start to chart a path towards a better future.
You've now got a solid foundation for understanding the complexities of the USAID situation. But this is just the beginning.
It is.
There's a world of information out there to explore, so stay curious and keep digging.
Absolutely.